Hi everyone, thank you for joining our next webinar on code consultation. I will kick us off now as I can see a lot of people have joined, so thank you for making the time today to dial in. We have a big enough team here today that are going to present to you on code consultation to give you a bit more information on the process in general and also the benefits of engaging with the program or with the process. So I will just to give you a reminder that we have a Slido link. So this should allow you to ask questions as we proceed through the webinar. So please, if you Google Slido and put in MHHS, you'll see where to enter your questions, and we'll have a Q&A segment at the end of the webinar as usual. And just a general reminder that we'll be recording this and including it on the website so that you can watch it back, or anyone who has missed the session can hopefully catch up then as well. And we will circulate the Q&A as well after the webinar. I will hand over to Andrew now, who's going to kick us off.
Yeah, hi there everyone. My name is Andrew Morgan. I'm the co-drafting and governance lead within the MHHS programme. This session today was in response to participants saying that they wanted greater information about the co-drafting process and the consultation process. So hopefully you find this interesting. We believe that if you can get involved, please attend the CDWG workgroup meetings. They're open to everyone. But I'll now start the slides. So yes, today we're just going to give an overview of the code governance and the code drafting and consultation process. I'm going to give an overview of the code drafting plan. Then I'll be handing over to my colleagues in the BSc and Rec, showing a spotlight on the upcoming consultations, and it'll be back to me just to talk briefly about the benefits, and then we go to a Q&A session. So we'll go to the next slide. So this, just to say that the code drafting work stream, primary objective is about translating the design baseline into the relevant code artifacts. Probably worth noting that most of the changes are in the BSc and a large proportion into the Rec as well. But there are other impacted codes such as the CUSA that will need to be updated. The main or the primary decision-making body within the programme for code drafting is the CCAG. They hold the programme responsible, and the code drafters responsible for delivering the code drafting plan and delivering the code artifacts. They're also responsible for approving the code artifacts at the end of the process, which is M6. That means that the code artifacts will be baselined ahead of go live, which is M8, M10. The way that we've sort of approached the code drafting activity is to chunk up the topic, the subject into topic areas, which we think are manageable chunks. The code drafters will draft these particular areas, and then we sort of send them out for consultation for industry review and refinement. I think you can see a list there of the subjects. I won't go through all of those, but yes, if you're interested in a specific area, then please engage with us. Just worth calling out as well, in previous consultations, we had a lot of parties raising sort of, through the code process, sort of questions or challenges about the design. We don't manage those design processes here in this work stream now for the design team to action. But as those design changes are approved, whether they're DIN or CRs, then we will pick those changes up and ensure that the changes in the design baseline are reflected into code, and to give industry assurance that we've taken all of the design requirements, current baseline and the future baseline. There is a consistency check process at the end of the code drafting process, which will ensure that we've translated all of the the design requirements into the code artifacts. Quickly now go through a quick overview. So each code consultation process has a pretty standardized process. We thought it's worth going through this at a high level. So as I said earlier, the code artifacts are produced. They're always published on the collaboration base, and there's a specific code artifacts page there on the collaboration base, and also in the public domain on the MHHS website. Once they're sent for consultation, parties will have a standard 3 weeks to review the code artifacts. We have a comments log which people and participants can submit their comments to us. These comments logs, once they've all been received by the end of the consultation window closing, we will publish that. We will also then, all the code drafters will triage all of those comments and action them appropriately. Again, another 3-week standard period, and the output of that is then published on the collaboration base on the website. All of these, the key areas are discussed at CDWG, which is a level 4 working group. Ultimately, once we've refined all of the code artifacts and there's no outstanding comments or no additional changes needed, then each tranche goes up to CCAG for approval, and these approved artifacts are then published like a clean version, or an updated version is then published on the collaboration base.
Apologies, Andrew, just to check, it's the code governance slide I'm sharing on the screen. Is that correct, or should I move forward?
So the next one, sorry, next slide.
There you go. Apologies.
Yes, so just hopefully people remember what I said there on the process, and yeah, that gives an overview of the process. So just a little bit about the consultation process, a reminder of what we're doing. It's a design-led program, therefore we're translating the design baseline into code. We will not be sort of including in-flight change requests or DIN issues into the code drafting because it isn't included in the baseline yet. But if they are approved, then the code is updated to reflect any changes in the baseline. The scope of the code artifacts, we sign it by each tranche. As I was saying earlier, I gave a list of the subject areas. Also probably give a more detailed view in the next slide on the project plan. But just to call out, for example, that interface items will be missing from this from the next tranche, which is registration. That's because interfaces will be delivered at a later date. Traceability matrix that we mentioned earlier is tracking all the design artifact requirements into code artifacts to ensure that we've captured them correctly. And also we need to call out there's a terminology and definitions tracker. Some parties highlighted in the previous consultation that there's different defined terms between the REC and the BSc. This is known and this is accepted. The MHHS programme is not seeking to rewrite all those defined terms. We just acknowledge that in certain codes there are different terminology used, and yes, that's all tracked in that sort of live document there. Go to the next slide. So this is the code drafting plan. As you can see here, the dotted blue line shows that we're in May. We're sort of finalising the first tranche, which was data services and meter services, and just want to call out that registration and BSc central services are the next tranche. And hopefully you can see there, if it's visible, that the registration consultation starts on the 31st of May, and that closes 3 weeks later on the 21st of June. And then also on the 21st of June, there's a 3-week consultation for the BSc central services. So again, if you're interested in those areas, then we will be given an update via the clock and via the collaboration base, and also through the CDWG distribution list that these code artifacts have now been published, and that we welcome parties' interaction with those. I probably won't go through them now, but you can see the other subjects will be following these tranches. And then also just to call out that we have a mop-up process, which is to pick up all design changes that might happen between now and the drafting happening. And also I mentioned that finalisation and consistency check, which is planned for next year. I think I now hand over to Matt to give a bit more detailed view of the BSc registration.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, so this is just to summarise the BSc documents that are in scope of the current tranche, which is the one we're working up towards a consultation on the 31st of May, which is the registration tranche. That has 3 core BSc subsidiary documents in scope. There's BSc 706, this is new numbering that we've assigned because these are new documents, which is the supplier meter registration service. It's a concept that exists currently in BSc 501, but it's the evolution of that service to support MHHS. So it has some common elements structurally from 501, but it is a new document that is optimized to set up MHHS processes. Similarly, BSCP 705 is under the heading license distribution. That is an evolution of BSCP 515 that has all the DNO activities that are required under the BSC for Mark Valley settlement. And then a less impacted BSCP is BSCP 68, which deals with registration transfers between CVA and SVA, between the CMRS registration system and SMRS. So while that doesn't re-describe the registration activities in 706, there's some linkages there, and there's some obligations on parties in terms of the communications that they have to carry out, and various handoffs. So if you were to look at this from left to right in terms of impact, it's kind of low, medium, and then high. The majority of the changes sit in 706, medium degree of impact on 705 of new content, and then a sort of a moderate, low impact on BSCP 68. To summarize qualitatively what those changes actually involve, it's principally to update the new registration processes, the associated SLAs and interfaces into 706 and 705. The distributor specific stuff goes into 705, and the SMRS elements go into 706. As part of producing those documents, this is a practice we follow with each tranche. We annotate the document with the source requirement that sits in the design artifact, so that a reviewer can actually find the origin of that requirement, so that it would be much harder to actually navigate without that. Those annotations are temporary; they will eventually be removed in the enduring drafting, but they are there to aid the review process. There is one additional subsidiary document, BSCP 550, which deals with the management of shared SPA meter arrangements of half-value import and export, which would become, obviously the half-value would fall away, but it would become managing import and export active energy. That BSCP has a lot of pointers into these other BSCPs. Specifically, it has pointers into the data service BSCPs that we've already drafted and to BSCP 706. So most of what it would add it's just handles between documents and coordinating type activities. So that one we've deferred to a subsequent tranche once 706 is complete. That should be a fairly straightforward exercise of just putting in, just updating those linkages. There's an additional new process that's quite complex that Market Wide introduces, which is the change in market segment process. We're also considering whether that could benefit from being put similarly to 550, because it's more of a coordination step to create a new BSCP that preserves the end-to-end process with all the handles from different actors, because the current BSC approach tends to slice up the MHHS processes by individual role. So you can look at one document and you can see all the obligations of an individual role, but sometimes it's hard to see the end-to-end piece. That is one consideration that we, in a later tranche, if the change of market segment would benefit from that coordinated end-to-end view, that could be put into a separate document. It would be mostly reusing existing processes, but clearly signposting the sequence. The other thing that obviously we do is that there's the MHHS operational choreography document, which has a lot of key SLAs for the registration service. That includes a lot of sort of 1 hour processing times, but it also has interactions with CSS processes, the secure active processing window. And then, so we've had to carry those through into the BSC, so that when it's notified of completion of a switch, that triggers up a lot of downstream processes. And finally, we need to ensure that the SMRS responsibilities are consistent with the enduring governance by code. That's obviously including new things like the DIP, but specifically with registration processes. If you look at the metering point life cycle from beginning to end, they are processes that in the design are just presented in a single end-to-end view that in the code world actually span codes. So you might have physical work, some sitting under the CUSA, you might have some registration activity sitting under the REC. That is something we need to preserve, that each process sequence of steps sits under the right code, and we have traceability documents, as Andy mentioned, to help reviewers navigate that. I think that is all from me. I can hand over to Sarah to present the rec slide.
Thanks, Matt. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Sarah Jones, and I work on the RecCo MHHS team. So I'm just going to talk through the changes that are in the rec within the registration tranche. So on the slide, we've listed the specific artefacts that are impacted or that we've reviewed as part of the registration tranche. So there's a number of articles there and artefacts there. Just to call out that the prepayment arrangement schedule and the address population rules have been reviewed, but we haven't identified any changes, so they won't be within the package of documents that are issued out for the consultation, but they're just shown on the slide for completeness. So there are a number of documents that are impacted by the changes, and there are various reasons for the changes. So they're summarised on the slide, and I'll just run through each of them. So one of the main ones across a number of documents is the removal of the data aggregators and data collectors as CSS users, and that impacts a number of the different different schedules. One of the things that's been discussed previously and agreed is that data services won't become optional CSS users, so there's no replacement to those references. They've just been removed from the various documents. We've also updated a couple of the processes around metering point data, so specifically the related metering points and the MPL address processes. So those specific schedules have been updated to reflect the new MHHS business processes and the interactions via the DIP. We've included within this tranche of consultation the electricity inquiry service data access matrix. That's been through discussions and a rec consultation through the consequential change route, and we're bringing that into the consultation here for information to show the new data items and the new EES user of data service. And then we've also got the update to the market exit schedule, which covers the introduction of the DIP manager. So we're looking at references to the DIP manager in addition to the existing references to BSEco, as that will be established as a separate role. Matt mentioned some of the end-to-end processes that link into CSS. So we've got the CSS end of those processes and reflecting the sort of end-to-end MHHS business processes and operational choreography across the switching and RMP update processes. And then the final point, again linked to Matt's side on the BSE, we've set out the split between responsibilities for the ERDS, which is governed under the REC, and the SMRS governed under the BSE, so showing the difference in responsibilities, with the SMRS managing all those relationships via the DIP, and the ERDS managing the relationships with the CSS. So that's a summary of the changes. We've got on the slide a couple of CPs that we've acknowledged, and you'll note them as part of the consultation as well, where we've referenced ongoing CPs. So I think I'm handing over to Kevin to cover the rest.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, so yeah, I'm Kevin Spencer. I'm on the code drafting team, and I've been working on the documents for BSC Central Services. So specifically in terms of MHHS, that's the load shaping service, market-wide data service, and the volume allocation service. There are 3 new documents and 1 update. So going through the new documents, there's BSCP 703, which are the central services for migrated MHHS metering systems, and this will ultimately replace BSCP 508, which is the supply volume allocation agent, BSCP. To go along with that, there is a service description which describes the SVA providing those services, and that will ultimately replace the existing service description for the SVAA. And there is a new annex that has been developed to section S of the BSC, and that will contain all the rules for determination of volumes for settlement. And so this is effectively an update to the requirements and obligations that are set out in Annex S2, but adjusted to such that it only impacts migrated MHH metering systems. And to go along with that, there are updates to supplier volume allocation, and this is section S, and that is really putting the obligations on suppliers in respect of their appointed data services and obligations on the SVAA in respect of the free services, load shaping service, market-wide data service, and the volume allocation service. As it said earlier, this consultation on these will be coming out on the 21st of June. Now I'll hand back to you, Andrew.
Brilliant, thank you. So yeah, just for hopefully the participants, you can see that having a focus on the regulatory framework is helpful for parties, is because we've got these legal and regulatory requirements to comply with them. Working with industry and your support, we believe that we can drive a more robust and better developed set of rules, which are therefore easier to understand for people to understand and comply to. With that increased understanding of obligations, so the more the parties engage at this stage, the more they will understand their obligations, and therefore participants engaging should have an increased compliance with the new rules. So we're hoping that our participants will join us in improving the quality of them and understanding their obligations. I think I now hand back to Katie to talk about Slido.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, so we're going to move on to the Q&A segment of the webinar if there are any questions that have fed through the Slido. So Alice is going to help us and to facilitate this part of the webinar.
Thank you very much, Katie. Hi everyone, I'm Alice Chudley and I'm a member of the PPC team and will be facilitating this Q&A. So if you have any questions, please do pop them on to Slido. I can see we haven't got any at the moment, which means the team's done a very good job of answering all your questions today in this webinar. But I'll give it a little bit more time and see if any questions do come through.
Thanks, Alice. So yeah, just a reminder while we give people a minute to see if any questions come through. We're going to upload these slides and the recording onto the website, so it should be there. If possibly any of your colleagues haven't been able to dial in today, they'll be able to watch that back in the coming days, if that's helpful. And then if there are any questions, we have the usual methods of contacting us, and we encourage you to reach out if you've any feedback as well on the webinar or on topics you'd like to see in the future being covered in a webinar format. So please do reach out following the webinar if you've any queries, and let us know via the various mailbox addresses there on the screen. Alice, has anything come in?
No, nothing so far.
Okay, I guess if everyone's happy and if there's no questions, we may call it at that and just distribute the slides. And then, as I said, if you do have any questions, please reach out to the team, and we'll make sure your questions make it to the correct source within the code bodies and within the program as well. Thanks so much. Hope everyone enjoys the rest of your day.